All right.
Hello. Hey
Hey,
there.
what's
Hey,
going on?
Tyler. Hey, what rethinking talent development? What a great topic.
This topic is blowing up these days. My feed is covered in talent development, thoughts, ideas, just different perspectives on it, how to make it better. And actually, this has been our most popular topic to date, Mark, since we've been doing LinkedIn Lives. I think our audience doubled in terms of attendance of who wanted to attend and wanted to hear more about this. So I'm excited to do it. Um, Also, if anyone has any questions, thoughts on rethinking talent development, how they see it in the future, or strategies, like drop them in the comments. Happy to talk more about it. So if you do have any thoughts, we're happy to answer them, or any ideas.
Great. Yeah,
Yeah,
we want to make this interactive, right? It's not about us talking at you. It's about things that are really the major issues that people are addressing or not addressing, and we get to see. So, just so you know whose kind of company you're in, I want to remind you that people like Bridgestone and Wiley and United Airlines and Panera Bread and Hyundai and Hilton have registered for our webinar. So we're honored that people are actually taking the time to go and sign up for this. So let's get right into it, Tyler. Time is money.
yeah, totally. So one thing like I've been seeing a lot of is about underspending in talent development, and like why that's important, why that's such a problem, because obviously can't rethink it or build it or start a program or optimize a program or make it better without getting without getting budget or financial backing. And the companies are really underspending in this area despite turnover being an issue, or different challenges around performance. So Mark, I just want to know from you, like, why do you think that's the case? Like, why do you think programs are not getting full budgets or enough to, or companies are not spending enough on it?
Well, it's interesting, because if there's layoffs, there's a lot of things that get cut. And sometimes it's a non-essential, sometimes it's the things that what can we do with less people and still be able to get quality? What can we do that really is interactive, but maybe people can do on their own? And unfortunately, learning and development is one of the things that gets cut. The problem is that I think we both know that learning and development's looked at it sometimes the wrong way. They're like, it's an add-on. It's a nice to have. It's a reason that, well, we have to have at least one of these programs. That's not the way it is. And there are ways to measure the return on it. And it's not just a survey that said people liked the webinar, or they liked what was going on at the organization because they gave this one little class. There are ways where people actually stay at organizations because they feel like they've been trained and learned beyond just here's all the rules, here's what can get you fired. That's
Exactly.
unfortunately what learning and development gets to do, and HR gets to do too much.
Right. And if it's seen differently, or if there is a way to change that narrative, because I think it's a lot of it's narrative on it, right? I think the perspective a lot of times from like business executives is like, this is a nice to have, seen as like a benefit, like as if it's like paid leave or something. Like, that's not the right way to look at it. Because like, if you think of it from like a numerical perspective, right? If you're able to show, let's say, if you're starting a program, let's say you don't have a program in place, or you just have like an LMS system and you have some courses and training. Now you at least have some numbers, and every company has some performance metrics, right? Like revenue or performance reviews, or things that matter to the business to function. Making that connection between L&D and that will foster more budget, will foster a better program. And it's because it's now taken from seeing it as a nice to have to like a must have. And you never want to be like in a nice to have category. So I think that's one way to do it. So if we move away from like an intuition where it's like, oh, we need L&D from this perspective because like we feel like we need to help, to numbers backing that intuition, then we can take a next step. So like, what have you seen in terms of like areas where L&D programs have faced challenges around showing numbers?
Well, that's the biggest problem, right? Is that for a lot of different divisions, it seems like a soft skill. It's like, well, we have this program, so many people have gone through it. And with learning management systems, LMS, how do we even know? Well, we can see they've taken it. I was like, well, how do you see it play out actually in the real world at work? Because I know some LMSs, it's a video you play and a quiz you take, and people guess at them and then get through it. And that's not it. It's not to check a box. It's really to go and say, what's changed? So, Tyler, what I see is that you can see the change because the culture and a lot of things change at the organization because of learning and development. They teach skills and they teach things that are beyond just job skills. What people want now more than ever is, how do I manage my life? How do other things that are affecting my work, the reason I work, all these other changes, how do I become a better leader more than just here's a list of rules? Show me, help me apply it, and let me see and work together with me on this. And some of that can be done with technology, but there's some where there's this human interaction part that I think companies that get right, they actually are the ones that retain and keep employees at a whole different level. When things are getting automated, you see these people get sticky and want to stay.
Right. No, and exactly. And then improves the employee experience overall. It improves. And then that if people are more engaged, you hope that leads to better performance. Right. And the thing is when I think about talent development, I think about it from both like the human perspective, which Marc is like much more with his leadership coaching. And I come from a data background and numerical perspective, but I always felt like there was a marriage and a link between those two. Because if you're a company and let's say in a specific role, your turnover is really bad, right? Or you think you have really high turnover, and there could be data that could show more investment in L&D might lead to less turnover, which in turn less hiring costs and better performance, right? And maybe keeping your top performers at a higher level. Showing that information can make a difference and can now look at executives might look at the program as more of like, again, like a business driver as opposed to like a reactionary, program. And I think that's always been my feeling in how L&D can be driven, to greater heights. Because if I see so many articles now on this being like, oh, there's not enough investment, can't show ROI, so we don't, the program's cut or it's less. That can change just with the right assessment and understanding of how to link the two together.
So here's what I think, which I know works, even in a large company, right? Because we work with companies that are Fortune 100 all the way to smaller, companies that are doing $10 million in business. And the difference is budget, obviously, but the thing is it's mindset. So Tyler, we talk about measuring things and we don't want to take the human aspect out because at least when I'm involved, I'm like, we can't just make it all about numbers, right? Yeah. But we also can't make it just about what people feel. What's the balance to be able to go and measure between ROI, return, and also making sure that you can justify a budget? Not everybody's really savvy at being able to do both of these things. How do we help?
Yeah, so I think it's about first the assessing where the gaps might be, and then intertwining that with your organization and culture and understanding that. So, and understanding the individual behaviors of the people as well, or of your team and how that's made up. So it's numbers I look at as just like numbers are just a measurement of the human behavior of everything else, but measuring helps you make things better, right? And that's why when we think about numbers, even in the real world, without numbers, like how do we measure things at all, right? So that's the way I look at it. And I think from a rethinking it as well, this then lends L&D to moving into ways away from like a one size fits all into like more personalized approach. Because if you have the integration between numbers and behavior and workplace, you can now customize programs because not only you now have the money to customize it, but also the data and information to customize it the right way. And, Marc, maybe you could touch on a bit of like how, when in your coaching, even the difference is, how you take different approaches, maybe, with different people. You do a lot more coaching than me. So I'm just curious because I feel like that sometimes gets lost in a big company is like, we're just gonna throw people in this program and it's everyone learns the same way. Everyone does everything the same way, but you might be losing people because people are different. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like just that as well.
Well, I'm going to take a crazy example that people don't think is learning and development: meetings, right? So let's say that you know that meetings are inefficient, ineffective. You're like, there should have been a memo. It still exists no matter what size company that you see. There's just a lot of time. They have these standing meetings. Things don't really work out. Let's say there was a learning and development course and a training on how to set up the meetings. Is this informational? Is this going to be something where there's going to be a decision made? Is this just brainstorming? And actually structured this and then walk people through and actually had a template and actually had leaders implement it. And then you saw meetings change. That is a simple example of how you watch something literally change because there was learning and development around something. Crazy example, but there's not a company that I have worked with that looks at their meetings and go, we got this perfectly or even close. And that's, I think, learning and development, people can kind of pigeonhole and say, well, it's just teaching certain skills. I was like, if leaders don't know how to have good meetings and how to communicate well, and you don't measure that and you don't see it change and you're actually, since that's a fundamental, you watch everything else not work well because of it. So I think we have to rethink talent development to say, are we even starting at the foundational basics to make sure that people understand how to communicate? And by using assessments and behavioral and cognitive assessments, we have data behind it that matches that, plus the people's teaching styles and learning styles and the way that things are communicated. We can help with all of that because we've seen it without this in companies. We see how it doesn't work without some measurements and some tactileness. Right, Tyler?
No, definitely. And I think with it's amazing because I think when we think about people's learning skills, I know myself, I learn better by doing. Some people learn better by listening. Others learn better by watching a lecture, right? I mean, this is why, like, even in the education system, like, some people struggle in classrooms because, like, they learn more by doing than by listening to a teacher. And I think in the hybrid world, it's even more complex because I find myself, I have trouble, like, attention span on computer for me is much worse than in person. Mm-hmm. And I think this helps also understand, like, does it make sense to bring people in for just L&D purposes versus online all the time? Like, does it make sense monthly or quarterly to do that? Because that might matter for your learning and growth. Some people don't learn as well on video. So I think in the hybrid world, it gets a little more muddled. And this is probably why also performance challenges pop up now even more, because in the hybrid world, it's harder to interact. You don't have the human interaction as much. So how do you make adjustments to that? And how do you drive a program, especially if a lot of your L&D things are just online? Right?
So let's talk about this. So here's something, when we talk about rethinking, people are like, okay, I've heard a lot of this. So here's what we do when we think about rethinking. It's called learning pods. So you have somebody who's a virtual trainer that's actually doing learning and development, and you actually get groups of people that are in smaller areas to actually get together in person. And it's not completely new. It exists, but how many companies just do one way? Like you said, we're just going to do our training online. You can't afford to fly people in to go and have trainings all the time. So this kind of resourcefulness and having to rethink things, you can have people get together, but if it's structured through the organization, you can actually supply some expectations and other things versus, well, people do this on their own. Anything that you have control of, you can't really measure as much, and you're just going to get, how did it improve? We have no idea, but some things working in certain cities, seems people are getting together. How can you replicate that? What we want to do is take what you're already doing well, see how it can get expanded, see how we can do this. And, there's locations that can be used where people interacting actually produces so much better results. We have measurements on why that works and how to reduce expenses to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's a key part of it is again, like, understanding, being able to be nimble and make adjustments. I think this is part of it. And I think a lot of times things get caught up in being static because in bigger organizations, it's hard to make change, right? You got to go through a lot of levels. Having more of a numerical tie-in allows us to be nimble. And this is why, like, I come from a marketing background. So just like, my 10 years of marketing, we were able to be nimble because everything was numbers driven and it was understood, right? Like everything, campaigns, right? I'm running an ad on Facebook versus Google versus this. Adjustments and nimbleness is what makes it successful, right? Because you got to adjust the time and adjust to the notion. Look at how fast work environment has changed from COVID. We went from like everyone at home, hybrid, the problems was we couldn't hire people. Then it's like we can hire. It's like everything changes constantly. And this type of technology-driven culture, it changes faster and faster. So this allows L&D to be as nimble and to be thinking about it from an optimization standpoint. And so it's part of the business itself. So it comes in and it's seen that way. And that allows for better employee experience with it. And it allows you to make adjustments that are meant for your company. And the one thing I will say is that when I've worked with companies, even within the same industry, all of them are different and in every way, right? Culture, you be in the same industry, some cultures are totally different. Org is different, management's different. All that stuff matters, and how people perform and how people learn in the same way. And I think I'm sure, Marc, when you do coaching or like leadership development, I'm sure when you coach entrepreneurs, they're not all the same, right? So it's the same side of thing. And I think that's where things get lost in the talent development space it's like, this worked here, it must work. It's not that it's not the case.
And because you can't just pick it up and apply it. So here's where we empathize a lot with leaders who go, it's hard for me to fund a program and be able to do something if I don't have measurement. And then we feel bad for the learning and development people who are like, I'm just trying to do my job. I'm just trying to do the best I can. And then you got the employees who say, I really want to be in an organization that cares about me, listens to me, understands me, even outside of my boss. I want to know the organization actually wants to invest in me. So everybody has needs that need to get fulfilled. The thing is that what I've learned through leadership coaching and consulting for half my life is that when I get to hear what leaders say, and I get to hear what people that are contractors at work say, and then I get to hear what the employees say, and I get to listen to all these voices, I can actually give you such insight on your organization, because even though I'm an outsider, the point is that, and so are you, Tyler, the thing is that people are dying to be heard. And when you get the data and you get the information, you can present it back in a logical way to say, here's what I see. Can't we start here? Let's try this. If it doesn't work as expected, we can adjust. And that's what we've both built our careers on, is looking at things and going, there's not one size that fits all. We're not telling you follow this track, it'll be exact. It's got to be to the point where we hear where the pain is. And that's why I mentioned the companies. It's not just large companies or small companies that are feeling this. Everyone is. But if you don't work with someone who's going to help solve it, you're going to go and somebody's going to be like, we have the solution. We're going to do this. It can't be an overarching solution. That's what we found. It's got to be individualized and grow internally to work with your team, and then be able to see that it gets sticky and stays. Not just let's slap this new system on the same way people use Salesforce for sales. They're like, this will be great. Yeah, I'll ask your people how Salesforce is working for you versus some other thing, and if they had a role in playing in if it's selection or not. So, Tyler, what are you seeing that people do to be able to incrementalize and actually get this inside an organization, this new way of thinking?
I think it has to start small. I find whenever I've done projects or working with companies on this, starting small, whether it's by role or a region, works best, because you can test. It could be a test case. It also allows for, again, not having to get so much red tape involved. Hey, we're going to test this out over here because here's a challenge we have. This is our biggest challenge, right? A company can say, hey, our biggest challenge is sales Southwest, okay? Or our biggest challenge is engineers, in Europe, okay, where it's like turnover is really bad. Then you use that as a test case. That allows, it's the biggest pain point, so there's more, it's going to be easier to get approved. And B, it allows you to do it on a smaller scale and learn and do it. So many times we work together, it's always small first. And I always find if you start small with the biggest problem, then it can grow from there. Because once the leadership understands, hey, this is a problem, it's actually costing us millions of dollars potentially. And after a year or 6 months, our small program shows that it's changing numbers, and those numbers are, then like the world's your oyster in L&D, right? Because it's like, you can now take different approaches to your other teams. So I find that that's the best way to go about it is starting small and working with whatever data you have to start with. So if you already have an LMS, great. If you don't, well, performance data, turnover metrics, right? There's other engagement metrics, whatever metrics you have, it's a good starting point. And then if you already have a program, it's great. You have more data. What can we decipher from it? And then what can be improved and optimized from that?
Yeah, and as we kind of like wrap up, I want to make sure we talk about continuous improvement and not just the static of it. And I know we really never introduced ourselves because we really wanted to get into that. So I want to make sure at the end we kind of give people a little bit of information of who we are, because it's really what we want to come across is that we've seen these problems over the course of our career, and the people who aren't continually addressing and advising on how to grow through using your internal people and the pain they have and having an external insight to go and say, here's what things are happening outside of your industry. We see that can become stagnant and stale, and then you are wasting money. And go back to your marketing, Tyler, half of marketing works and advertising, we just don't know what half, right? That was the thing that people always said. So you really want to be able to do this, but talk about continuous optimization and how that plays a role in this.
Yeah. So anytime you have a program in L&D, and it comes from my marketing background, you're always looking for ways to make things better. And what I mean by optimization, it's like feedback from the program. So like from the people within your talent development, right? How to improve it, how you can make things better in a continuous way. And also just optimizing and making changes that matter across the board. So for example, like let's say you might have something that works in sales, but may not work on your engineering team, or may not work, in project management, because it's a different culture. Even within teams themselves, the culture is different, right? We like to think, yes, there is an overarching culture, but then there's subcultures within an organization. So optimization means once you have that data, and once we're able to in real time to pick that up, it's to improve it that way, right? So using that data to make smarter decisions. As we have more data, it allows us to make better decisions around it. And then also just around data itself, or around the program itself, when we're thinking about optimization and what can be done continuously, it allows you to, again, change your strategy and make bigger investments. I think that's the case. To go to management and say, hey, this is working so far, but this isn't. So if we do this, let's test this here. And I think that's the best way to think about it from that standpoint.
And I think people are afraid sometimes to go and say what's not working because they think their budget's going to get cut.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you don't say what's not working and that you're thinking about improving it or changing it, it will get cut because somebody's going to look and go, well, we're just not getting the results. And that's unfortunate. But when we come in every company we've worked with, it's consistent to go and find something that can be improved, sometimes tweaked. That's it. It's not cutting a part of it. It's just that the way it's been working, we're willing to go and lean in and go, well, have you thought about this, and come up with ideas? That's why not just using an assessment, not just having one way to do things, it may be different at different areas of the company. And that's the beauty of what, Tyler and I, so, we didn't talk about our background, but as we kind of wrap up, I've been a strategist and have asked questions to companies as large as, Becton Dickinson and Tiffany's and CNBC for my whole career. But then I've also worked with small companies that are $5 to $10 million. The one thing that I learned from all these interactions is that there's people, because I used to work helping people with technology, is that there were people that had a reason why they chose a platform, the Mac versus a PC. And it really wasn't about the computer. It was about the ease of use, or it was about the way they saw things, or about software. And now as I do leadership training and keynotes and other workshops, and even come up with a book called Yeah, But, Cut Through the Noise to Live, Learn, and Lead Better, it's about the yeah, buts we use and the excuses that you even say, yeah, but I can't because. So I look at learning and development the same way I look at business. There's always a reason why you can't, but I want to find 10 reasons you can. And I want to look at this in a way and prove it. And that's why I'm working with Tyler, because Tyler's big about data that proves our collaboration together. So Tyler, tell us about you too.
Yeah, so I'm CEO of Gradmor. We work talent intelligence. We provide talent intelligence solutions that help people hire better, like train and develop better, retain talent. And everything we do is we try to connect numbers back to performance outcomes, ROI, business objectives. And I'm like the data behind people like Marc. So we can, when we're conjoined together, it creates a beautiful partnership in that sense. So we believe, yes, as much as we believe in data, we also believe in the human element. And it's really about data just tells a story around it. So that's where we see ourselves. Again, my background's more marketing. I have a data background. But a lot of the concepts that I did in marketing, I apply to talent. And it's really about pushing change and driving change within the talent space. I see that as a key part of what we do. Is it's not just about showing numbers, it's about making changes. And the numbers we put behind things drive change. And that goes for a small organization that maybe has never started something all the way up to an enterprise. And, we love working with different companies and cut across different industries as well.
Because they all have one thing in mind. They care enough about their people to go and want to keep them there and build a culture that is something they're proud of. That's the people who are easiest to work with, the ones that know it's about the people, invest in it, and understanding that working with us actually is probably less expensive than losing one employee. And that's the crazy part, right? Sometimes people think, well, that's going to be a lot of money. I was like, every time you lose an employee that you could have kept and they don't tell you on the exit interview because they're not willing to go and burn a bridge, it's really sometimes about how they learned, what you said, what you didn't do. And we can find a lot of that out through data, interactions, behavioral assessments. One of the things that we're going to leave you with is also a cheat sheet, because we realize that, that's 30 minutes. Some people aren't going to watch this live. But there's going to be a cheat sheet that actually goes over the old way of thinking and the new way. There's also on the bottom, there's going to be a behavioral assessment that takes 6 minutes to be able to look at. It's individualized, and you can send it to as many people you want to on your team. And we'd be happy to go over that with you because we want to start with data. But we're not here to sell anything as much as we want to help rethink, right? That was the whole series. It's about rethinking things because we see people are signing up again and again for our LinkedIn Lives, and we're looking at this, that there's a need, and we just want to be here to be able to support it because both of our businesses and both of our lives thrive on making sure that the outcomes that people want are actually what they get. So we're willing to continue to put that effort in and do these LinkedIn Lives as long as people still want to engage.
Exactly. Yeah. And then our next rethink we'll invite you guys to as well. We're really excited to think about different topics in the hiring space, in L&D, in talent. So most of the things we cover is on the talent side of things. So look out for our next invite and our next rethink series that we will have soon.
So thanks for being here, and you'll see the cheat sheet in your LinkedIn. It's also going to be posted. You can download it and be able to go through it. And we are available for questions and answers after the LinkedIn Live, because we just want to have a conversation to see what's going on in your individual. And some people have already reached out to us and had conversations with us, and we're excited to continue to expand what we're talking about to actually customize it to our audience. So thanks for being here.
Take care, everybody.